Okay, so for the third example, we're going to look at the Uni app, and we'll convert it to use objects. Now, looking at the previous version, we've got to go back 2 weeks, I think, where we had just list. Let's find it. There's Uni app 02. And looking at the database, we just had one list. In fact, we had a list, and each user was a tuple of data. So you can see the tuple of data there is for Alice. It's just a event. It doesn't have any information about the username and the type, the program or the job. It's just got a name. If it's an admin, then there's a username, and if it's staff or student, then they have a job description or a program. So we're going to end up using more code at the moment, but later it will be very valuable because we'll be able to do more things with it. So if you look at that, how many classes are we going to need? Well, we're going to need one to represent users, one to represent admin staff, one to represent teaching staff, and one to represent students. So that's 4 classes. Why do we need those 4 classes? Because they're storing different information. Okay, it's not just about the roles inside our system. It's because the person just stores a name, the user stores name and user ID, staff stores name, user ID, and job, and the student stores name, user ID, and program. You could just create one class and deal with that way, but this is more of a demonstration of how we can use classes, and we'll get later on. We'll see how valuable that is. So for the moment, this is perhaps not the most efficient way of doing it, but it is. It's more for demonstration purposes. So one thing we can do, though, once we've done these different types of user in our 4 classes that we're going to create, is that we can also add some modules to the staff and student classes. So typically, it's supposed to represent some sort of university app where staff are attached to modules, maybe as lecturers or tutors, and students are attached to modules to study. Okay, so that, and if you wanted to, think about this, this is kind of very basic system of what happens in Moodle already. In Moodle or something like that, we can broadcast a message to all the people on the course. So a staff member can broadcast a message to all the people on the course, and that would be really typical. Rather than broadcasting to everybody in the whole university, or all the students, as we've done before, it's more common to have a subset of those people. Incidentally, we've only got 9. Is it 9? No, we've got 7 users in our system at the moment, right? We'll build this so that we can, later on, we can put all the users in a database, and there could be thousands. The code would be exactly the same. It's just, for the moment, the data is just dummy pretend data. Okay, so let's see the classes we want, and they're pretty minimal, actually. The person class doesn't need to store anything other than the name. So the constructor just has a single variable name. Okay, and we pass that into the constructor, and it's stored inside the class. The user class, almost as minimal. We just need the name and the user ID stored in the class. The staff class needs a job. Okay, so name, user ID, and job. You may notice, by the way, there's some replicated code because the staff is like the user class but with a bit more information, and the user is like the person class but with a bit more information. Think about that. We'll get to that later on in the course, in how to reuse that kind of code. Okay, there's the staff, stores the job and the modules, and the student is almost identical. Again, we might make use of that later on. Student is also almost identical, but this stores the program rather than the job. Notice it's got the modules here, but we don't do anything with the modules. We just create an empty list, so we don't pass in any modules at the beginning. Okay, that's our 4 classes, our 4 basic classes. They don't have anything other than data. They don't have any methods attached to them. But we can now build a database like this. So there's two chunks of this example. First is that we'll too early. I'm clicking that button. First of all, we'll build the 7 users, and you can see here this block of code at the top here where my mouse is. So we've got a guest, we got admin. These are just the variables. They're exactly the same as before, as our previous version. Yeah, guest, admin, staff 1, staff 2. So like that. But now, rather than before we created these tuples, now we're creating objects. So guest is an object of the person class, admin is an object of the user class, and then student 1, 2, 3 are objects of the student class. So we've got 3 student objects, each using the student class to define what happens to that. Then I haven't built an extra method for adding a student or a staff member to a module. We can just go straight in. I mean, this is a kind of perhaps a lazy way of doing it, and often you would see a staff1.add module, but instead I'm just accessing modules.append. So what I can do is access the modules list, which is defined inside the staff class or the student class. Let me remind you of that. So let's find the new version of the code. There it is. Oops. So the staff class here has this list of modules, which is just set up to be empty at the beginning. Here we can add, for staff 1, we go to their modules list and we just append another item. So you get this, you can see this idea of, this is called chaining. So we chain the staff, its modules attribute, and we add, append the course, the module onto that member of staff. Okay, and so this is just a random list of modules that I've generated that will just add modules to each staff member. Let's stop the video there, and then in a second we'll look at how we then modify the main method. So we've built the database now. We've got these 4 basic classes, each one representing a different type of user, and we've built a database out of that, and then we'll look at in the next video at how to use that.